I used to think the quiet hours in a cinema were sacred. After the last show, when the audience was gone and the screen went dark, I'd walk the aisles with a flashlight, sweeping crumbs and ticket stubs into a tray, feeling like a priest after Mass. The hum of the projector cooling down was the only sound left. A slow, tired breath that matched my own. The Strand Cinema wasn't much anymore. Its carpet smelled of damp velvet, and the gold trim on the seats had dulled into bronze. But it was steady, predictable. Every night at 11:45, I'd lock the glass doors, count the till, and make sure each auditorium was empty. It was routine, the kind that keeps a man from thinking too much. There's comfort in repetition. The same halls, the same echo when I called out, "Closing time." I told myself I liked the quiet because it meant everything was in its place. But the truth is, I needed it. Silence doesn't ask questions. It doesn't remind you of the things you can't undo. Sometimes when I'd pass by screen 3, I'd catch a smell I couldn't place. Burned sugar and cold air. The kind of scent that doesn't belong to anything living. I'd stop, listen for the air vents or a stray reel spinning, but there was never a sound. Only the feeling that someone had just been there. People said cinemas die when no one goes anymore. I don't think that's true. I think they die when someone stays too long. When the last audience refuses to leave. I used to joke about that years ago. They loved the movie so much they stayed forever, I'd tell the new hires. But now, when I walk the aisles at night and see the faint imprint of bodies on the seats, pressed fabric that never lifts, it doesn't feel like a joke. I keep the lights dim, the way it was on that last full night. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of guilt. Some nights, when the wind hits the old windows just right, it sounds like applause. If stories like this find you when you need them, don't disappear. Subscribe to the channel and stay close. I have more truth to share. It started with the sound of laughter, not loud, faint, like an echo caught in the walls. I was checking the concession stand, half asleep on my feet, when I heard it drifting down the hallway from screen 3. A woman's laugh, bright and full, followed by the rustle of a popcorn bag. At first I smiled. Maybe one of the cleaners had left the radio on again. But when I turned the corner, the hall was empty. The door to screen 3 was slightly ajar, a thin line of light cutting across the carpet. We hadn't shown a film in there for months. The projector had burned out last winter, and no one ever came to fix it. I pushed the door open and stood at the back. The room smelled old, heavy with dust and something sweeter beneath it. Caramelized, almost burnt. The screen was blank, but the projector window glowed softly, like a dying ember behind glass. I thought maybe a power relay had kicked on by mistake. I should have gone straight to the booth, cut the circuit, done my job. Instead, I waited. The laughter came again, closer this time. Then the sound of a chair creaking, fabric shifting. I flicked on my flashlight and scanned the rows. Nothing. Just rows of faded red seats and air so still it felt underwater. I whispered, "Hello?" and instantly regretted it. My voice didn't echo. It just stopped, as if the room swallowed it. I shut the door and told myself it was memory, sound bouncing from another screen. "Happens in old buildings," I said. "Sound lingers, that's all." But the next night, when I came in, screen 3's door was open again. The seats looked freshly used, indentations deeper, armrests askew, and on the floor, near row D, was a small paper cup filled halfway with soda. Still cold. I checked the security feed, static. The monitor flickered every time I switched to that auditorium. The other cameras were fine. Only that one refused to stay still, as if something moved too quickly for the lens to catch. By the third night, I stopped pretending it was nothing. I started locking screen 3 from the outside, double bolting it. Yet every morning when I came in, it was open again. The lock unlatched, the light on. I told myself stories to make it reasonable. Drafts, bad wiring, squatters, anything. But deep down, I knew the truth. Places remember. Especially places where something ended before it should have. Once, near closing, I thought I saw movement through the porthole glass. A flicker of silhouettes sitting side by side, shoulders swaying with light that wasn't there. I leaned closer, hand against the doorframe. The projector hum rose faintly behind the wall, and for a second, I saw what looked like a reel spinning in the booth, though we hadn't kept film stock in years. That night, I didn't stay to clean. I turned off the lobby lights, left the doors unlocked, and walked home through the empty street. The wind carried the smell of popcorn, though the machines hadn't been used in hours. I told myself I wouldn't go back the next day. But morning came and I was there again, unlocking the doors, sweeping the same floor, pretending I had a choice. The cinema was waiting, and somehow I felt it knew my name. I started bringing a chair into the booth above screen 3 and sitting there after close, like a watchman who didn't trust his own walls. The city outside thinned to a single traffic light blinking red on an empty corner. Inside, the projector housing gave off that tiny electrical warmth, the kind that smells like dust waking up. I kept the main switch off. I kept telling myself that mattered. Around midnight, the glass began to breathe on the inside, a ghost of condensation blooming and fading as if someone on the auditorium side were leaning close, listening. I wiped it with my sleeve and saw a smear shaped like a hand. It wasn't frightening the way you think. It was familiar. The fingers were short, the palm wide. I knew those proportions. I'd held that hand once and promised things. That was the first night I said her name out loud in the booth. Mara. The room adjusted around the word, swallowing the R like fabric taking a seam. In the silence after, a soft clatter rose from the auditorium, the sound of a ring hitting an armrest, then rolling. I didn't move. In my memory, her ring had slipped once, when we were young and stupid and believed in forever. We laughed then. Here, it sounded like a verdict. The next evening I took the long way through the rows, touching each seat back as I passed, counting under my breath. I was auditing the dead like a manager checking inventory. Row C had weight. Row F smelled of shampoo I hadn't smelled in years, a clean, pearly scent that tugged at an old morning. At D12, my fingertips tingled with cold, and I remembered the fire extinguisher handle biting my skin the night the wiring went bad, and the crowd surged the wrong way because my voice broke when it should have carried. Applause found me again, softer than before, as if cupped by hands. It came and went with my breathing. When I held my breath, it stopped. When I exhaled, it returned, a patient echo that refused to lead. I tried to laugh, to prove I still could, but the sound went brittle and landed at my shoes. On the screen, the ambient light from the exit sign painted a horizontal wound. I stared at it until it became a hallway I knew too well. The night we rehearsed the evacuation plan, and I said, "It'll never happen here." That promise had the same temperature as the projector glass. Lukewarm. Comforting enough to keep a man from noticing the heat building in the walls. I sat in the front row, seat A5, my seat for late checks. The cushion remembered me. It sighed. The ceiling vents ticked like cooling metal, though the system was off. In that clockwork hush, I felt the room tilt, just a fraction, as if aligning to a story I had told too many times. The story where I did everything right. Then the speakers whispered without power, the rustle of coats, the hush of a crowd settling. I should have run. Instead, I closed my eyes and let the sound dress me in the night I'd avoided. The perfume, the ring, the handprint, all of it arranged itself in the dark like a real threading. When I opened my eyes, the blank screen held a reflection, not of me standing there, but of me walking down the aisle with a flashlight raised, turning toward the exit and choosing not to shout, choosing quiet, because quiet had always obeyed me. The theater breathed in. I finally felt it breathe out. If this story touched something inside you, leave a not for me, but for the next person who's looking for a reason to stay. The night I stopped pretending. The storm outside had broken the power. The whole building was running on its backup generator, a low, throbbing hum that made the floors vibrate. Every bulb flickered like a heartbeat. I should have closed early, but I didn't. Some part of me wanted the dark to come through. Screen 3's door was already open when I reached it. Inside, the projector was running on its own. A reel turned, slow and steady, though there was no film loaded. Only the white light spilling onto the screen, alive and trembling. The chairs were filled, silhouettes lined in silver, shoulders, heads, outlines that shimmered like smoke. They were watching something I couldn't see. I stood at the back, too afraid to move, too tired to care. The air was thick, warm, electric. Someone coughed. A man laughed once. the same tone I'd heard years ago before the smoke alarms failed. Then a woman's voice said, "It's starting." On the screen, shapes flickered into existence. An image of the theater itself. The same rows, the same faded carpet. Only the man at the front wasn't a stranger. It was me, standing where I stood that night. The reel looped the memory. The moment the wiring sparked. The red exit lights going dim. The people turning toward me, waiting for instruction. Waiting for me to speak. I watched myself hesitate. In the film, my mouth opened but no sound came out. I saw my hand go to the door, then stop. The reflection on the screen trembled. Then the fire spread, slow at first, then blooming like a mouth-swallowing light. The audience didn't scream. They just watched, the way I'd always watched it in my mind. And in that moment, I understood. They never haunted me. I haunted them. My silence had trapped them here, looping the same unfinished night. Every sigh of the projector, every flicker of dust in the beam, was them trying to leave, and me keeping the show going. The laughter returned, softer now. Not mocking, forgiving. I stepped closer to the screen. The image brightened, and the faces turned toward me. Not angry, not lost, just waiting for something I had owed them all along. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My voice cracked, but it carried. The generator thudded once, and the reel stopped mid-spin. The white light dimmed to gold. One by one, the figures stood and began to fade, like breath on glass. I stayed there until the last seat emptied. The air cooled. The smell of burned sugar lifted. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was full of what had finally been said. When I left the room, the door closed gently behind me, on its own. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. That was the night the cinema exhaled. If stories like this find you when you need them, don't disappear. Subscribe to the channel and stay close. I have more truths to share. It's been 9 years since that night. The Strand Cinema is gone now, demolished to make way for a parking lot and a chain grocery that smells of bleach and recycled air. They paved over what used to be the lobby, poured cement where the projector room once hummed like a heart too stubborn to quit. I watched from across the street when the machines came, their lights flashing in the fog. For a moment I thought I saw the screen flicker one last time under the dust, as if it wanted to project its own ending before vanishing. People say buildings don't feel, but I know better. The Strand had lungs. It breathed through vents and cracks, whispered through the reels. Every sigh of the floorboards had meant something. When they flattened it, the air in town changed. Too still, too polite, like grief that's been organized. After it closed, I moved inland, took a job cataloging archives for a museum. All day, I handle photographs of faces that stare back through decades. It's quiet work, the kind where memory feels safe again because it belongs to someone else. But sometimes, when I slide a film strip to the light, I see shapes that shouldn't be there. Seats, a corridor, the faint curve of a stage curtain. The Strand, printed in the shadows, it refuses to be forgotten. I don't talk about that night. Not really. The report said, electrical malfunction. No one asked why the exits jammed or why I was the only one who made it out. I never corrected them. You learn to live with the stories people build for you. They're easier to maintain than the truth. But the truth has its own kind of persistence. It waits in silence. It rewinds. I still wake at 11:45 most nights. The hour I used to lock the doors. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for a key that isn't there, my fingers closing around air. I sit by the window until dawn, watching the light stretch across the empty street. It feels like the projector beam again, searching for a screen that no longer exists. You'd think confession brings peace, but it doesn't. It just makes the silence honest. The ghosts don't vanish. They change shape. Now they live in the pauses of my breathing, in the distance between my words. When I speak too quickly, I can almost hear them behind me, waiting for their cue. I went back once, or what's left of it. The parking lot was slick with rain, and the only light came from a broken lamppost flickering the same tired rhythm as the old projector used to. I stood in the place where the auditorium would have been, closed my eyes, and listened. No laughter, no applause. Only the soft hiss of tires passing on wet asphalt, like static fading between reels. But when I exhaled, something shifted. Not sound, but pressure. The familiar heaviness of a room full of held breath. I whispered, "You can go now." The wind passed through me, gentle, cool. Then it was gone. I think forgiveness doesn't arrive like light breaking in. It arrives like air finally leaving the body that's been holding it too long. People ask why I never watch movies anymore. I tell them I lost the habit, but that's not the truth. The truth is, when the lights dim and the reel begins, I start counting seats. I wait for someone to turn, to look back at me from the dark, to see if I'm still there. I live smaller now. One-room apartment, few belongings. Sometimes in the late hours I play the faint hum of an old projector on my phone, a loop I found online. It helps me sleep. The rhythm feels like a heartbeat I once knew. Memory isn't punishment anymore. It's maintenance. A quiet cleaning of the aisles, a sweep of the dust that keeps the dead from fading entirely. I suppose that's what I've become, the keeper of the reel, even after the screen is gone. Once, not long ago, I dreamed of the theater again. It was whole, the lights soft, the seats full, but no one faced the screen. They were all turned toward the back, toward me. And I understood. They weren't waiting to be released. They were waiting for me to join them. When I woke, my pillow was damp, and my hands smelled faintly of dust and burned sugar. I didn't cry. I just lay there, listening to the silence. It felt almost alive. Sometimes, I wonder if the cinema ever really closed, if maybe I'm still there, walking the aisles with a flashlight, whispering to the empty seats, convincing myself that I'm the one who's leaving. But I've learned something in the years since. Places don't trap us. We trap ourselves in the stories we're too afraid to end. And every night, just before sleep, when the quiet settles too completely, I hear it, the slow applause from a crowd that isn't there. Not loud, not mournful, just steady, as if they're reminding me the show is over, and it's finally time to go home. It never followed me home. It was already here, ready.